Hello, everybody, and welcome to another My Music. Now, a bit of a different My Music today, a bit of a special My Music, because we're not going to be talking specifically about a new record or anything that's come out. We're going to be talking about a book that's come out, and it's a book written by the gentleman sat to one side of me now, unless you're listening to this as you drive around the M25, in which case I don't want you to watch your screen. I'm talking about Derek Shulman, who you may know from a band called Gentle Giant. We will be talking to Derek about his life in music and what a life it has been straight after this.
Keep on, don't stop. Keep on, don't stop. Keep on, don't stop.
Derek, thank you for coming on and talking to me today. The book, it's coming out soon. Giant Steps, a great title for a book, because obviously it talks about the band Gentle Giant and it's got that connection to it. But obviously you've had giant steps in your career as well, or in your life, shall we say.
Even at my age, I'm still climbing.
Yeah.
Much slower, of course, but
What's the last great thing that you learned?
what I'm working on right now is the benefits of the highest end of AI. One of our albums in Gentle Giant, we weren't able to find the multi-tracks for them. It was an album called In a Glass House, and it's one of the fans' favorites. And I'm in the studio now in Brooklyn, New York, which is close to where I live, actually taking not just the stems of the songs, but the actual tracks. I'm able to separate the tracks. Even in the tracks, I'm able to separate the kick drum from the cymbal, it's amazing what a new tech will do. So I'm learning about the benefits of AI rather than the deficits, if you like. So that's what I'm doing, as well as like talking to you about the book and everything else.
Well, listen, you've got a convert here. I actually think AI is brilliant. I think we have to embrace AI. I think, and I talk about it a lot in stuff that I write, I think it's not AI that's the problem, it's humans.
I agree. I think that's, the AI probably will, I'm not going to say, will be running all over us quite soon, but that's another program, if you like.
Yeah. But AI in the hands of creative people is brilliant. And same as anything in the hands of creative people. And now you've seen that throughout your career, and that kind of comes out in the book as well. Okay. You've met people that, let's say, have had talent, and then you've met people that haven't had talent. And you don't like mince your words about that within this book.
Well, I hope that the book is about, I'm going to use the word authentic. Authentic for myself, actually, first, and authentic for telling honest stories about my life and the lives of others in my career in music, and not just the music business, as a musician, and then in the music business. And it's it's been a wild ride, and it continues to be one.
Yeah, a lot of times when we have people on here, and I ask them to sort of relive their journey in music, they immediately go back to a family figure. And you start your book there. You start your book with your dad.
Yeah.
How important was that whole upbringing in terms of the rest of your life, really, and both in music and just your kind of outlook?
Well, I started the book, as you said, with an event which was both traumatic and important in my life personally and professionally. My father was a jazz musician and a brilliant one as well. I mean, he could literally, he was a trumpet player, a band leader, and he could pick up any instrument within like 10 minutes and master it. So, in the respect that myself and my siblings had his DNA and thankfully were able to utilize that. Thankfully, it was a blessing that we were able to have and utilize the rest of our lives at the same time. He was 50 years old, and I was a schoolboy going to grammar school, and he was unwell in the morning after a gig, and I went to get my elder brother Phil, and he died in my arms, and of a massive heart attack. And that, to be perfectly honest, was incredibly traumatic for me. And it was for the rest of the family, but me and my brother Phil in particular, because we were there when he took his last breath. And since then, I had therapy to discuss why I have anxieties about certain things, and like we all have. I mean, are things that happen when you're younger really affect you, and this was something which affected me and the whole family, actually. So yeah, and actually the fact that he died so suddenly, knowing his lifestyle, which in fact was a jazz musician, and he lived life to the full, meaning that he smoked about 50 or 60 cigarettes a day. He drank pints of beer when he was between gigs and everything else. He wasn't a drunkard, but certainly he liked his alcohol. And the fact that he died at 50 years old turned all of us off the idea of imbibing any sort of mind-altering chemicals and or alcohol. I'm not alcohol-free. I'll have a glass of wine, but certainly I'm not a drinker. So that all these things affected me throughout my life, and I think helped me to become the age I am, which was old. I'm not going to let it. You can Google me for that.
A lot of the stories throughout the book, as you go along, keep referring back to that in a way, because and it was, in a way, it's quite unusual, because you were there amongst a lot of these figures who were doing a lot of drugs or alcohol at the time and whatever, but because you were pretty much sober, you could actually recall these incidences. You actually, you knew what was going on,
Absolutely, I did, and it was, again, there are bands that thought they were doing, or bands that were taking a lot of stuff, whatever it was, and thinking they were being creative and having lots of fun, whereas they were destroying their lives. I mean, I'm not advocating one thing or another. Everyone's choice is their own, but it's when I just saw Ozzy, his last gig, and him passing away, and it was very, very sad. But poor Ozzy was, I shouldn't say, but he and Sabbath, who were great friends of ours when we were in Gentle Giant, and even afterwards, certainly enjoyed partaking of the good life and what that meant as far as their chemical romance, if you like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to ask you about Ozzy. Obviously, he's all over the internet at the moment because of his passing, and also there's been a lot about his sort of relationship with Youngblood and the fact that he's almost like passing on the mantle. I mean, Youngblood sang Changes at the thing. Why, from your perspective, kind of looking at that, why do you think that's kind of so important for everybody at the moment, that somebody from a working class background, or somebody that has kind of struggled to make it where they are, but now they're making it within the industry, and who's someone that's trying to do something different in the industry, because Youngblood is trying to do a lot of things differently? Why do you think people are looking at that and saying this is so important that sort of the legacy carries on? I'm just interested in your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, obviously, when I was talking about coming from nowhere, I was born in the Gorbals in Glasgow, and if anyone knows what that means, it means that I was born in a tenement flat where five of our family, not seven, because we moved to Portsmouth after, and when I was born, where I was raised. But I was born in a place where we didn't have a bathroom, and there was one toilet for 5 families. So, it's not the same thing as, when people think they're poor today. However, it's important that that you don't lose your grounding as a working class person, and the values that you have in that respect. Ozzy and the band never did. That's something I really admired about Ozzy. Ozzy was always Ozzy from the very beginning, which I know about because we had the same managers as Black Sabbath back in the earliest days, to when unfortunately he passed. But his attitude and the band's attitude and our attitude was that you do what you do, and don't look around to see what someone else is doing. What you do is do what you do and be great at what you do, and whatever it is, hopefully it's playing an instrument, because that's important to me, certainly, and be the best at it. Don't look around saying what someone else is doing, and then when you do that, go on a stage and see if you get any people to pay to see you. And if you do, then go to another stage. And that way you can build an audience by a real audience, not an audience who are looking at their iPhones or computers. And this is what Black Sabbath did in the earliest days. And this is what we did. And this is what I did in the other side of the business, to make sure that the bands were authentic and also really good at what they did. And were not followers, they were leaders. And so I don't know if I'm answering any questions, but it's a way to, and again, I'll just say this, and not look at likes and not look at, followers, and not look at fame and fortune first. Be really good and be really creative at what you do, and take yourself out there, not some avatar of who you are.
Yeah, I know. And I think, especially around sort of Gentle Giant coming out, look, there was a lot of people in the sort of prog sphere and art rock and whatever that came from privilege as well.
Of course.
Wasn't there? Yeah. So standing up in that group was quite important as someone that had come from a poorer background. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we were musicians first, and playing music and being good at it and pushing ourselves was the most important thing. And if we were able to get on stage and make a living at it, even better. Fame and fortune would come afterwards. But the most important thing is being really, really good at what you do, and not following someone else who's already up there, and not looking for validation on the internet.
I think one thing that you make very clear in this book, because I think you want to make that very clear, is that whilst you stayed authentic to yourselves all the way through your career, that didn't mean to say that you weren't prepared to flex and change, because you did. I mean, and that's what makes the book so interesting as well. You start off, the first band, Simon Dupree.
Right.
By the way, did people used to call you Simon?
Yes, they did, and the fun was sort of the funniest stories, because I had 2 brothers in the band, and they were asked, what's it like to have a famous brother?
I don't know.
But they were asked, not me. But
yeah.
But I was called Simon. I was the front guy, so that I took the mantle, and I was the singer, and so I kind of embraced it to a degree. Why not? And we were lucky enough to have a very big hit and a couple of other minor hits. But but one thing, as you said, throughout my, I don't want to call it a career because I haven't had a career. Throughout my life in music, I've always hopefully kept, and I'm going to use this word again, and I hate to do it, kept my authenticity, kept remembering who I am and my feet, on the ground in the Gorbals in Glasgow, if you like. And if I was successful in certain ventures and the monies, helped me make a good living, even better, which it did certainly as a music executive, certainly.
The other nice thing about this book is that there's some beautiful human moments in it and some beautiful almost comedy moments in it as well. I was going to ask you, should every band, now people need to go and read the book to get this, but should every band have a recording of the Trogs arguing?
What have you heard it? Have you ever heard that?
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. Yes, 100%. This is, if you have not heard it, then you absolutely, it was back in the day, it was something that all the bands knew about, had that tape, because it was so hilarious. And so, I mean, you couldn't write a script that was funnier. I mean, people can talk about Spinal Tap over here or whatever, but this was, it was something that we all loved, because I don't know if anyone knows, the younger generation probably don't know. The Trogs were a band from near my area, from Andover, Hampshire, and they had a big hit with Wild Thing, and an engineer left a tape on during a recording session, and with their Andover accents, they were arguing amongst themselves and playing certain things, and it was about 15 or 20 minutes of absolute hilarity. I'm sure if an engineer caught our band, there would be moments like this, but this was very special. And during one session, as I said in the book, Martin Russian, who was our engineer, had 6 reels of tape going around the studios, and when we were like scratching our heads wondering what we should put in the song, he'd say, hold on, and he'd push the fader up, and you hear that accent of Reg Presley saying, "It's a fucking number one, it is," and it was great, the stress of the studio, and we crack up and probably go to the pub for a pint and come back, and we were refreshed and creatively back together, if you like.
And the other thing that works throughout this book as well is that people may have heard of appear, and they come in and then they go out, etc. But in a very humble way as well. I mean, you've got very early on, Reg appears, or Elton John, as most people would know him. But it's a very sort of sweet tale. It's not kind of like some people would really push the fact that they were in and around Elton John's world, but it just kind of flows through, like, he was in and out of our lives for a short while, and it's quite natural. And I like that. I like the fact that this doesn't seem like it's like you're name dropping for the sake of name dropping. It's an integral part of the story. Yep.
Yeah, Reg was, I shouldn't say Reg, Elton, Reg at the time.
Well, he called you Simon, right?
No, he actually called me Derek, actually, thank God.
Oh, there you go.
Was that for our keyboard player, who was ill for a period of time, and he really fitted in really well. I mean, he was a superb musician, also a great guy, and he got along with all of us, and he loved what me and my brothers were doing, and saw the musicianship that he had as well. And he was with us for several months. Our keyboard player came back. But me and Ray, my brother Ray, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, we stayed in touch, and we got on well. We became friends with Reg, and he actually said to me and Ray, you guys should listen to some of this stuff that's happening on the West Coast. I mean, some great new music's coming out of there. Frank Zappa and The Spirit and all these other things, and he turned us on because he was a real muso, and so, at one point after, a year after he played with us, we got in touch with him and said, I remember we were whispering in your ear that we were going to try something new. Well, we're going to do that. And in fact, he said, wow, I'd like to think about being part of that. And so myself and Ray went up to Watford, or near Watford in England, and he just met Bernie. And he said, I'd like to think about being part of what you're thinking about. And so we said, cool. And what are you working on? He said he played things like Skyline Pigeon and a couple of other songs, and they were great. But we went up to the train and we went out for a drink and then we went back to Portsmouth at the same time we saw him. He said, I'm going to change my name, by the way, just let you know, to Elton John. And I didn't say anything, but I kind of nudged my brother Ray and said, not sure about that one. Well, of course, we went back home and it wasn't the sound we were looking for. We didn't know what we were looking for, but we did. This kind of pop R&B stuff wasn't for us. Thankfully for him. So we said, Rich, it's not really for us, but good luck on your career. And a year later, of course, he was Elton John, and
the rest is history. Yeah,
the rest is absolute history. But we stayed in touch over the years, and I mean, I saw him 2 years ago here in New York, and in fact, actually, he wrote several songs for my first group, and he forgot about them, and I gave him the cassettes of them. And Elton he's just a class act. He is now what he was way back then, which is very heartening to have. I mean, just me and my wife and Elton, and his couple of kids were there, and it was great to catch up with him again. And we stayed in touch over the years, just sporadically. So it was just Elton.
and he's currently now doing a lot of podcasts with young musicians coming through, and he's really championing a lot of new music.
Yeah, Elton was a muso back in the day. I mean, he knew more than anyone I knew. It was amazing.
How did you find that whole track? Because that's the other part of the book. Once we get past Gentle Giant, I hate to feel like I'm abridging this, because folks, go and read the book, because it's it goes through the detail, and in some in great detail as well, and beautiful stories. But how did you find that transition from being in the bands, the first band, Gentle Giant, etc., into the record industry? Because at first there's a story in there that you were going to give it up fairly quickly on. Yeah.
Well,
and it was your better half, right, that said, no, don't do this.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I was offered a job I was living in LA actually at the time, and I was offered to do production and everything else. And there was no plan or plan B. I wasn't quite sure what it was I wanted to do, but thankfully I didn't have to go begging in the streets with a cup for at least a few months. And I got a call from a friend who was at Polygram Records in New York, and he said, we're restructuring the department here, and it's called the Rock Department, and you should come out because there's a situation where you might find a new kind of career. And my first thought was, his name was Dan. I said, Dan, that's not for me. He said, you know what, why not try it? So I flew to New York, and to cut a long story short, I took the job. And it was basically promotion / artist development. Then it eventually went to A&R. And I remember the first day I was there at Polygram, and I had my little tiny office, and I went from office to office to office to office, and realized that in every office they had their priority. They had their special band that they wanted to promote. And by the end of the day, I realized that the music business wasn't the music business. It was the business of music and who championed you. And I remember at the end of the day, I went to my little rented flat, one bedroom flat in the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And I called my wife, said, I'm coming home tomorrow. I'm not doing this. And she said, no, don't. Let's give it a chance. You'll get into it. And I did. I went back the next day and realized that I could actually. There were people. Most of the people there that I worked with, they liked music, but they weren't musicians. But some of them weren't there for the music. They were there for the perks. They were there for the lifestyle to get the drippings off the stars that would, whatever it was. But I was able to find myself in a situation where if an artist came in, I could relate to them because there was nothing that an artist could say to me that I hadn't done. So, for instance, when I'll just say Bon Jovi came in, when I signed John, there was nothing that a band could say to me that you don't know what it's like, because I did know. Of course, I knew what it was like. I slept in a van. I'd flown private. I'd flown, or I slept on the floor. It was, with all the situations that a musician goes through, there was nothing that they could say you don't know what it's like. So I could relate to artists in a different fashion than when I was in a band.
Bon Jovi was a great example as well, though, because you say in the book that he kind of surprised you as well, in as much as I think you call it his shark behavior, because he knew he could play when he wanted to play that shark and get what he wanted, which wasn't necessarily your way, was it?
No, but at the same, no, he was very, very focused. Probably one of the most focused musicians and artists I've ever met. But in a focus in a good way. He wanted to learn very quickly, and he did. But I remember at the time, when I was signing him, and he was putting the band together. Richie just joined, and he had Run Away on the radio, and we were. But I sat down with him person to person. I said, John, who is it you want to be? What is it you want to be? What is it that is your dream? And he looked at me and said, I'm going to be as big or bigger than Elvis. And
which is quite a thing to say, isn't it?
Absolutely a thing to say. And I looked at him, and you look for a twitch in the eye or a smirk. No, that's exactly what his focus was. And when we put Slippery When Went out and Living on a Prayer came out, hallelujah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you feel like it's getting harder for musicians these days to do that? I mean, I see absolute grit and determination coming through with some of the young artists that are on here. And I've seen some of them, they're working their way up very successfully. When they first come on, they might be here, because I've been doing this for nearly 6 years now. And
Wow.
Some of them that I've had on, will be playing small venues, 200, 300 people. And now they're like headlining festivals, which is great. And I love to see that progression.
Right.
And a lot of those, you can see it in their eye, are people that they say it's a modern thing to say, but they say they manifest it. But it's the same belief that John had there. But do you think with the mechanism that's there now for getting music out, the fact that it's digital, it's it's no longer so much money in the physical product, and that even touring is becoming very costly for people, not necessarily making money. Do you think it's harder for people to get there now? Would you still feel as confident if you were in the music industry in the same position now?
Well, I kind of. Well, yes, it is. It's a lot harder. Of course, it is. The mechanism of how you're seen, how you're heard. The jigsaw puzzle has gone from 1,000 pieces to 1,000,000 pieces. But if you have bands that are true to themselves, that are not followers, that are leaders, that are doing something which is absolutely theirs and no one else's, and they get an audience, and so and when they go somewhere else, they'll get another bigger audience. That's the way that your career is made. You know, yes, you can go on TikTok. Yes, you can go on all these other things and get likes and become viral. But that's secondary. That's an adjunct. You get your audience live. I mean, my example for that, even though it was back in the day, was when I signed Pantera. I went to see them. I was running a company. I was running Atco Records, and I went down myself to see them because I knew, I just had a feeling about them. And they were playing a club of 200 people. And, you know, and I've seen lots of bands, and I've been involved in hundreds of other things. And within 3 songs, I didn't just think this could be massive. I became a complete fan. I knew they had what they called it. They had it. And there's something that they were completely who they were. They weren't trying to be anyone else. And I became a fan with the 3 songs. And I knew that they weren't going to be on MTV, which is a big thing back in the day. Radio wouldn't play them because they were too heavy. But I knew that if they could convert me to almost jumping into a mosh pit, then I would put money behind them as a touring band and go out there and tour and tour and tour and go to one place and get 500 people and come back again 6 months later, they'd get 5,000 people. And this is what I believed in. And at the same time, the people that would go see them would buy their record.
I think it's a very, very good philosophy for life. And it's actually something that Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, when he does his sort of corporate speaking, talks about to the corporate world. He says, you want to create fans, not customers.
Absolutely correct.
You know, because customers can choose to walk away. You must have seen time and time again with Gentle Giant, as you had to reinvent yourself through punk coming in and whatever, the ability to hold on to fans, even towards the end where it may have been diminishing, you had retained a fan base. And you know, ultimately that's such an important thing for a group to do, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. And in fact, here we are, 40 plus years later. And if we talk about Gentle Giant, it's probably the music and the legacy is probably as big, if not bigger, than it was when we were playing out, in Europe and in North America. So, and that's that's something that I have discovered. I'm not discovered, and realized that we were our own. We did it for ourselves first, and we were not following anyone. We were just following our own path, and that legacy, whatever that means, has grown. And now I see younger people trying to play our music, and the popularity is almost as big, if not bigger now, than it was back in the day. So it leaves you with a career. It leaves you with a legacy of reality, and not just that's a. I don't know. I didn't hear that quote from Bruce Dickinson, but not customers, fans, and that's interesting. That's a very good quote.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. Some of your peers are still going that were out there, Jethro Tull still putting out albums, albeit every so often. Ian hinting that it may be the last one. Every time it goes out, another one goes out. Yes, just talking about doing another tour again. I had Steve Howe on here the other day. Are you pleased you finished the Gentle Giant episode when you finished it? And yeah.
It was we stopped that chapter of our lives, and it was a superb chapter. It was a brilliant chapter, and we didn't want to become a tribute band to ourselves or a parody. And to be perfectly honest, some bands who continue to go back and go on the road 30, 40 years later, I I have no issue with any of these people trying to make a living or enjoying what they're doing or whatever, for whatever means. But well, number one, it makes me uncomfortable, to be honest with you, that bands go out and they have one member, or in some cases no members of the band, and call themselves this. I understand that you have to make a living. I understand that that you have to put bread on the table. But if it's just for ego or I don't know what it is, but I couldn't do that. It's to be a tribute band, to think that what you've done then is the zenith of your life when you stop at age 28 or 30. No, we moved on. I moved on, as you see in the book. I moved on to do other things. I'm still doing other things, even though I'm an old fart.
And long may it continue, sir. Long may it continue. And one thing to say, just to finish on as well, Derek, and thank you for coming in and talking today, is that you've had the happy coincidence as well that your music's continued by people sampling you as well. That's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The hip hop world has absolutely taken on our music, the Gentle Giant music, as we've become very popular in that world. And in fact, there's a gentleman called Questlove. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah.
I went backstage with him a couple of years ago, and he told me something which I don't know whether I'll say it, whatever. He said, just the story was I went backstage and I was taking Ann Wilson of Heart. I was working with her to do a spot with the band The Roots. And when the engineer of NBC came out, he asked me, am I the Derek Shulman that was in Gentle Giant? And I went, yeah. Why you asking me that question? And he said, hold on a second. And out trotted, the band, The Roots, and Questlove. And they all came out with albums and I had to sign autographs and for them. And here's Ann Wilson standing and saying, what the hell's going on? But Questlove told me that, do you know that you got a ghetto pass?
Wow.
And so we've been sampled by Run the Jewels, and more recently we've had Travis Scott start his album, his album which came out last year with Proclamation from Power of the Glory. And from what I heard, as a little birdie told me something, that it's going to be winning an award in England in a couple of weeks.
Fantastic.
So So he starts the show, and that funny thing is, he starts the show off with me and the band playing Proclamation, and his audience of 60,000 kids are singing along, and they don't know what they're singing along to, and it's Gentle Giant, it's fantastic.
So Derek, all of those fantastic years as Simon Dupree, then in Gentle Giant, being the lead singer in front of a band, and now you're cooler than ever before. What a great thing to get. And do you know what? I feel like that's a beautiful thing, because I feel like for a lot of us, when we get to a certain age, it's kind of actually, if we put the work in, we do become cool by association, and that's great. And you put the work in, didn't you? So
yeah. I worked. Yeah, I was a hard worker. I was.
Yeah.
Still am.
So you deserve it, sir. You really deserve it. Giant Steps, the book, it's coming out. Get it ready for Christmas. Fill your socks. And as I have always said, don't bother with any of those self-help business books or whatever. You will learn more from reading a book like this about life and business than you will get from any book that someone's generated out of AI and stuck a couple of chapters in on mindset and whatever. Absolute rubbish. Read a book like this. Real stories, real people, real things to overcome in life, and somebody that's done it gracefully as well. Derek, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, sir. Thank you so much for joining us to have this little conversation on here. Please do go and order the book now. We will be back soon with more My Music soon. But until then, from Derek and myself, thanks for watching. Bye for now.